Across the world's wildest hunting grounds, grizzly bears remain an unmatched terror, fast, furious, and utterly unpredictable. From Alaska's rivers to Russia's frozen forests, hunters, anglers, and even rangers have found themselves locked in sudden battles with nature's fiercest predator. These are not just chance encounters. They're life-or-death ordeals where survival hinges on seconds. In this video, we dive into real, chilling stories of men who came face-to-face with the fury of a grizzly. From wrecked trucks to riverside ambushes, expect 6 gripping stories of instinct, violence, and survival in the unforgiving wild. The remote wilderness of Ussuri Krai stretched endlessly under the pale morning sun of June 4, 2025. This rugged territory in Russia's Far East had remained largely unchanged for centuries, its dense taiga forests serving as home to some of the world's largest brown bears. The region's isolation made it a magnet for serious hunters seeking the ultimate trophy. Despite warnings from local authorities about increasingly aggressive bear encounters in recent years, Dmitry Volkov and his hunting partner, Alexei Petrov, had traveled over 800 kilometers from Vladivostok specifically to track a massive Russian grizzly that locals claimed weighed over 700 kilograms. Both men were experienced hunters who had spent decades pursuing game across Siberia's harsh landscape. Volkov, a successful timber merchant, had invested his recent profits in a pristine full-size SUV worth nearly $100,000, equipped with custom hunting modifications and reinforced panels designed to handle the region's punishing terrain. The morning had started promisingly. Fresh tracks in the muddy forest floor indicated their target had passed through the area within hours. Petrov, the more cautious of the two, had suggested they remain closer to their vehicle, but Volkov's enthusiasm drove them deeper into the wilderness. The bear's trail led them through thick underbrush and across several small streams, each step taking them further from civilization. Around midday, they discovered where the grizzly had been feeding on a recently killed moose carcass. The sight filled both hunters with excitement and apprehension. Claw marks on nearby trees reached heights that confirmed the bear's enormous size. Volkov estimated they were perhaps 2 hours behind their quarry, close enough to make contact before evening. They decided to return to their truck to reposition for a better approach. The vehicle sat parked in a small clearing approximately 1 kilometer away, its metallic blue paint gleaming through the forest canopy. However, as they approached the clearing's edge, both men froze in horror. Their expensive truck was under attack by the very bear they had been tracking. The massive grizzly stood on its hind legs beside the vehicle, its enormous paws methodically destroying everything within reach. Windows exploded under the force of its claws, sending glass fragments across the forest floor. The bear's powerful jaws clamped down on the driver's side door, metal creaking and bending under pressure that would have crushed human bones instantly. Volkov watched helplessly as months of modifications were torn apart in minutes. Custom rifle racks were ripped from their mounts, and expensive camping equipment was scattered like confetti. The truck's reinforced panels proved utterly inadequate against the bear's raw strength. The animal seemed particularly focused on the vehicle's interior, perhaps attracted by the scent of food or driven by territorial rage. Petrov whispered urgently that they should retreat and call for help, but Volkov refused to abandon his investment. He had spent too much money and traveled too far to lose everything to an angry bear. Against his partner's protests, Volkov decided to approach the vehicle and attempt to drive away before the damage became irreparable. The plan seemed feasible initially. The bear appeared absorbed in its destruction, providing a window of opportunity. Volkov crept forward while Petrov remained hidden, ready to provide covering fire if necessary. The distance to the truck was perhaps 50 meters, easily manageable under normal circumstances. Everything went wrong when Volkov stepped on a fallen branch 20 meters from the clearing. The sharp crack echoed through the forest like a gunshot. The grizzly's massive head turned instantly toward the sound, small dark eyes focusing on the human intruder with unmistakable hostility. For several heartbeats, neither bear nor man moved. Then the grizzly dropped to all fours and charged with shocking speed for such a large animal. Volkov ran toward the truck, hoping to reach the driver's seat before being caught, but the vehicle's engine had been damaged during the attack. When he turned the key, only clicking sounds emerged from under the hood. Realizing the truck was useless, Volkov abandoned the vehicle and attempted to flee on foot. The bear closed the distance rapidly, its thunderous pursuit shaking the ground beneath both their feet. Volkov made it perhaps 20 meters before stumbling over the uneven terrain. The grizzly reached him as he struggled to regain his footing. Petrov, watching from his concealed position, later reported that the attack lasted only seconds, but seemed to stretch into eternity. The bear's first bite was delivered to Volkov's shoulder, lifting him completely off the ground, before slamming him back down with devastating force. Petrov immediately began firing his rifle, hoping to drive off the animal before it could inflict fatal damage. His first 3 shots struck the bear's flank, causing it to release Volkov momentarily. However, instead of retreating, the wounded grizzly became even more aggressive, delivering a second bite to Volkov's neck that proved instantly fatal. The gunfire continued as Petrov emptied his magazine, several rounds finding their target. The bear finally staggered backward, blood flowing from multiple wounds, before disappearing into the dense forest. By the time Petrov reached his friend, Volkov had already succumbed to his injuries. The damaged truck remained where the bear had left it, now serving as an expensive monument to the encounter. Petrov spent 3 hours hiking to the nearest settlement to summon help, leaving behind both his dead friend and the destroyed vehicle. Rescue teams eventually recovered Volkov's body and confirmed the truck was beyond repair. The incident served as a stark reminder that even the most prepared hunters could become prey when facing Russia's apex predators on their territory. The pristine wilderness of Kodiak Island stretched across nearly 9,000 square kilometers of untamed Alaskan territory in the summer of 2019. This massive landmass, separated from the mainland by the turbulent Shelikof Strait, had earned its reputation as home to the world's largest brown bears. The island's abundant salmon runs and berry patches supported a thriving population of these apex predators, some weighing over 1,500 pounds during peak feeding season. Bartholomew Wickshire had traveled from his home in Vermont specifically to experience Alaska's legendary fishing opportunities. The 43-year-old insurance adjuster had spent months planning this solo expedition, studying topographical maps and researching the island's most productive salmon streams. His goal was simple yet ambitious: to catch a trophy king salmon using traditional fly fishing techniques in waters where few anglers dared to venture alone. The island's history stretched back thousands of years, originally inhabited by the Alutiiq people, who had coexisted with the massive bears through careful respect and understanding. Russian fur traders arrived in the 18th century, followed by American settlers who quickly learned that Kodiak's bears demanded constant vigilance. Modern visitors were required to attend safety briefings and carry bear spray, though many experienced outdoors people preferred firearms for ultimate protection. Wickshire had chosen a remote stream approximately 15 kilometers from the nearest ranger station. Local guides had warned him about recent bear activity in the area, but the promise of pristine fishing conditions outweighed his concerns. He carried a lightweight rifle and bear spray, feeling adequately prepared for any potential encounters. The morning of August 14th dawned clear and cool, with mist rising from the water's surface like ghostly fingers. Wickshire had been fishing for nearly 3 hours from the stream's eastern bank, casting his line into deep pools where salmon gathered before continuing their upstream journey. His technique was methodical and patient, qualities that had served him well in Vermont's trout streams, but seemed almost meditative in Alaska's vast wilderness. Around midday, Wickshire noticed increased salmon activity in a promising pool on the stream's opposite side. The water appeared shallow enough to cross safely, perhaps knee-deep at its maximum point. He had successfully forded similar streams during previous fishing expeditions, though never in bear country. After studying the current and testing his footing, Wickshire decided the potential rewards justified the minimal risk. The crossing began without incident. Cool water flowed around his waders as he carefully picked his way across the rocky bottom, maintaining his balance against the gentle current. Halfway across, he paused to adjust his fishing rod and survey the far bank for the best casting position. The salmon pool looked even more promising from this vantage point, with dark shapes moving beneath the surface that suggested significant fish activity. What Wickshire failed to notice was the massive Kodiak bear fishing approximately 100 meters upstream. The animal had been focused entirely on catching salmon, using its powerful paws to snatch fish from the rushing water with remarkable precision. Bears typically became so absorbed in fishing that they paid little attention to their surroundings, but the sudden splash of human movement immediately captured their attention. The bear's head turned toward the sound, its small, dark eyes focusing on the unusual figure standing in the middle of the stream. For several seconds, both predator and human remained motionless, each assessing the other's intentions. Wickshire later reported that his first instinct was to retreat slowly toward the bank he had just left, but the bear's reaction eliminated that option. Without warning, the massive animal charged downstream with shocking speed. Water exploded around its enormous paws as it covered the distance in seconds, its approach creating a thunderous roar that echoed off the surrounding hills. Wickshire barely had time to unsling his rifle before the bear reached the stream's edge. The collision knocked Wickshire completely off balance, sending him tumbling backward into the deeper water. The bear's first swipe caught his left leg, razor-sharp claws tearing through his waders and into the flesh beneath. Pain shot through his body as he struggled to regain his footing in the rushing current, blood beginning to cloud the clear water around him. Desperation drove Wickshire to fire several shots into the air, hoping the noise would startle the bear into retreating. The rifle's reports echoed across the wilderness, but the massive animal showed no signs of backing down. Instead, it pressed forward, delivering a second swipe that caught Wickshire's jacket and shredded the heavy fabric like paper. Bleeding and increasingly desperate, Wickshire spotted a large boulder protruding from the stream approximately 10 meters downstream. He abandoned his rifle and fishing equipment, focusing entirely on reaching that potential refuge before the bear could deliver another attack. The current helped carry him toward the rock, though each movement sent fresh waves of pain through his injured leg. Somehow, Wickshire managed to haul himself onto the boulder's flat surface, immediately turning to face his attacker while shouting and waving his arms frantically. The bear had followed him downstream, but seemed hesitant to enter the deeper water where the rock sat. For several tense minutes, predator and prey regarded each other across the flowing stream. Finally, perhaps deciding that one injured human was not worth the continued effort, the bear slowly backed away from the water's edge. It cast one final look at Wickshire before disappearing into the dense brush, leaving the wounded angler alone on his rocky refuge. The journey back to camp took nearly 4 hours of painful crawling and limping, but Wickshire survived his encounter with Alaska's apex predator, forever changed by the experience. The rugged backcountry of a national park in northwestern Montana stretched endlessly under the autumn sky of September 2021. This wilderness area had served as grizzly bear habitat for thousands of years, supporting one of the largest populations of these apex predators in the lower 48 states. The region's remote valleys and dense forests provided ideal conditions for both wildlife and the increasingly popular pursuit of creating extreme outdoor content. Maximilian Thornberry had built his YouTube channel around dangerous wildlife encounters, accumulating nearly 2 million subscribers through increasingly reckless stunts. The 28-year-old former college dropout had discovered that audiences craved authentic danger, rewarding his videos with millions of views and substantial advertising revenue. His latest expedition aimed to capture unprecedented footage of grizzly bear behavior during their pre-hibernation feeding frenzy. The area's history included numerous documented bear attacks dating back to the region's early settlement period. Native American tribes had long understood the importance of respecting these powerful predators, developing complex protocols for sharing territory with animals that could weigh over 800 pounds. Modern wildlife biologists continue to study the delicate relationship between humans and bears, although social media influencers increasingly ignore their carefully researched safety recommendations. Thornberry had assembled a small crew consisting of cameraman Felix Blackwood and safety coordinator Marina Voltaire. Both team members had expressed serious reservations about their employer's latest plan, which involved deliberately provoking a large grizzly to capture its aggressive response on camera. Previous expeditions had already resulted in several close calls, but Thornberry's subscriber count continued growing with each dangerous stunt. The morning of September 23rd began with the team hiking deep into unmarked territory, following game trails that led away from designated camping areas. Thornberry had researched recent bear sightings and identified a valley where a particularly large male had been spotted feeding on huckleberries. His plan was simple yet incredibly dangerous. Approach the bear closely enough to provoke a defensive reaction, while capturing everything on high-definition cameras. Around noon, they discovered their target. The massive grizzly stood nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder while feeding, its thick autumn coat gleaming in filtered sunlight. Blackwood estimated the animal's weight at approximately 700 pounds, making it one of the largest bears they had encountered. The bear appeared completely absorbed in feeding, methodically stripping berries from bushes with remarkable dexterity. Thornberry instructed his crew to position themselves at a safe distance while he approached alone, wearing multiple cameras to capture every moment from various angles. His stated goal was to get within 20 feet of the bear before attempting to provoke a reaction. The plan violated every safety protocol established by wildlife experts, but Thornberry's confidence had grown with each successful stunt. The approach went smoothly initially. The bear continued feeding, apparently unaware of human presence despite Thornberry's deliberate noise-making. He had discovered that talking continuously while approaching often prevented surprising wild animals, though this technique had never been tested on creatures capable of killing humans instantly. When Thornberry reached his target distance, he began the provocation phase of his plan. He started by shouting at the bear, using aggressive language and threatening gestures designed to trigger a defensive response. The massive animal looked up briefly, but returned to feeding, apparently unimpressed by the human's attempts at intimidation. Frustrated by the bear's lack of reaction, Thornberry escalated his tactics. He began throwing small rocks and sticks toward the animal, carefully avoiding direct hits that might cause serious injury. His goal was provocation, not genuine harm, though the distinction seemed lost on the increasingly agitated grizzly. The bear's behavior changed dramatically after the third thrown object struck a nearby tree. It stood on its hind legs, reaching nearly 8 feet in height, and stared directly at Thornberry with unmistakable hostility. The animal's massive head swayed from side to side as it assessed this strange threat, powerful muscles rippling beneath its thick fur. Thornberry continued his provocation, convinced the bear would eventually retreat like others he had encountered. He shouted louder and made more aggressive gestures, his cameras capturing every moment of the increasingly tense standoff. His crew watched nervously from their distant position, ready to intervene if the situation deteriorated beyond control. The grizzly's charge came without warning. One moment it stood motionless. The next it was thundering toward Thornberry with shocking speed. The distance disappeared in seconds as 800 pounds of muscle and claws closed the gap between predator and prey. Thornberry barely had time to realize his mistake before impact. The collision sent him sprawling across the forest floor, his expensive cameras scattering in multiple directions. The bear's first swipe caught his extended arm, razor-sharp claws tearing through jacket sleeves and into flesh beneath. Pain exploded through his body as he rolled desperately, trying to avoid the animal's massive paws. Blackwood and Voltaire immediately sprang into action from their observation point. Voltaire deployed bear spray, while both team members shouted at maximum volume, creating enough noise and chemical deterrent to give the grizzly pause. The animal backed away several steps but remained focused on Thornberry, who was bleeding from multiple lacerations. The standoff continued for several terrifying minutes as the bear decided whether to press its attack or retreat. Thornberry lay motionless, following protocols he should have respected from the beginning, while his crew maintained their defensive positions. Finally, perhaps satisfied that the threat had been neutralized, the massive grizzly turned and disappeared into the dense forest. The helicopter evacuation took 3 hours to arrange, during which Thornberry received emergency first aid for his injuries. His wounds required extensive surgery and weeks of recovery, but he survived the encounter that should have killed him. The incident sparked intense debate about the ethics of wildlife harassment for entertainment purposes, though Thornberry's subscriber count ironically reached new heights following the release of the attack footage. The grizzly had delivered its warning clearly, though whether future content creators would heed that message remained uncertain. The dense forests of North Carolina's Appalachian Mountains stretched across thousands of acres of pristine wilderness in October 2018. This region had supported thriving black bear populations for centuries, with an estimated 8,000 bears roaming the state's mountainous terrain. The area's abundant oak and hickory trees provided crucial food sources during the autumn months, when bears entered a state of hyperphagia to prepare for winter hibernation. 3 experienced hunters had traveled from different states to participate in the region's traditional bear hunting season. Cornelius Blackthorne from Virginia, Percival Grimwood from Tennessee, and Augustus Fairweather from South Carolina had met through online hunting forums. They decided to combine their skills for a week-long expedition. All three men possessed decades of hunting experience, though none had encountered the unique challenges of camping in active bear territory. The mountain region's history included numerous accounts of bear encounters dating back to early European settlement. Cherokee tribes had coexisted with these powerful animals for generations, developing sophisticated methods for avoiding conflicts while sharing forest resources. Modern wildlife biologists estimated that black bears, despite their name, could weigh up to 600 pounds and climb trees with remarkable agility. The hunting party had established their base camp in a remote valley approximately 12 miles from the nearest Forest Service road. Their location offered excellent access to game trails and water sources, though its isolation meant help was hours away in case of emergency. The men had chosen this spot specifically for its distance from other hunters and its reputation for supporting large bear populations. Blackthorne, the most experienced member of the group, had insisted on bringing military surplus camping equipment designed for extended wilderness operations. Their base camp featured 3 large tents arranged in a triangle around a central fire pit, with cooking and food storage areas positioned downwind from their sleeping quarters. However, their food storage methods would prove tragically inadequate for the challenges ahead. The evening of October 15th had concluded successfully, with Grimwood harvesting a medium-sized buck that provided fresh meat for their camp. The hunters spent several hours processing the deer, storing portions in coolers while preparing steaks for dinner. Their celebration included several bottles of bourbon, which may have contributed to their relaxed attitude toward camp security protocols. Against established wilderness safety guidelines, the men left their food storage unsecured overnight. Coolers remained unlocked and were easily accessible, while garbage was left outside their tents rather than being properly stored in bear-proof containers. The scent of fresh deer meat and human food created an irresistible attraction for any bears in the surrounding area. Around 2 in the morning, a large black bear weighing approximately 400 pounds approached their campsite. The animal had been feeding heavily in preparation for winter, consuming up to 20,000 calories daily to build fat reserves for hibernation. The concentrated food scents from the hunter's camp provided an opportunity the bear could not ignore. The bear's initial investigation focused on the nearest tent, which belonged to Fairweather. The animal used its powerful claws to tear through the tent's zipper, creating a large enough opening to investigate the interior. The noise woke Fairweather, who initially believed one of his companions was playing a practical joke. Realization struck when Fairweather saw a massive black shape silhouetted against his tent wall. The bear was methodically searching through his gear, scattering sleeping bags and equipment, while investigating every item for potential food sources. Its powerful claws left deep gouges in expensive camping equipment as it pursued increasingly elusive scents. The commotion spread to the other tents as the bear abandoned Fairweather's shelter in favor of the central food storage area. Coolers that had seemed adequately secure proved no match for the animal's strength and determination. The plastic lids cracked under the pressure from the bear's powerful jaws, while the metal latches bent and broke as the bear accessed their stored provisions. Blackthorne emerged from his tent first, carrying a high-powered flashlight and a bear spray canister. His military training had taught him to assess threats quickly and respond with measured force rather than panic. The beam of his flashlight revealed the full scope of their situation. A massive black bear surrounded by the scattered remains of their food supplies. The bear looked up from its feeding, small dark eyes reflecting the flashlight beam with an almost supernatural gleam. For several seconds, neither human nor animal moved, each assessing the other's intentions in the flickering light. The bear's muzzle was covered with remnants of their dinner, while broken cooler fragments lay scattered across the forest floor. Grimwood and Fairweather joined Blackthorne outside their tents, both men carrying bear spray and maintaining careful distances from the intruder. The bear seemed unimpressed by their presence, returning its attention to a container of trail mix that had survived the initial destruction. Its methodical approach suggested this was not the animal's first encounter with human food sources. Blackthorne decided to use his bear spray when the animal began investigating their remaining gear. The concentrated pepper spray struck the bear directly in the face, causing immediate distress as the chemical irritant affected its eyes and respiratory system. The animal reared back on its hind legs, pawing at its face while making distressed vocalizations. The deterrent proved effective, causing the bear to abandon the campsite and retreat into the surrounding forest. However, the damage was already extensive. 3 expensive coolers lay in pieces, their contents scattered and contaminated. Sleeping bags bore claw marks and tears, while several pieces of electronic equipment had been damaged beyond repair. The hunters spent the remainder of the night securing their remaining supplies and assessing the destruction. Their week-long expedition was effectively over, as most of their food and essential gear had been destroyed or rendered unusable due to contamination. The experience provided valuable lessons about proper food storage in bear country, though the cost of their education exceeded several $1,000s in damaged equipment. Dawn revealed the full extent of the bear's visit, with claw marks on trees and disturbed earth marking its passage through their camp. The men packed their salvageable equipment and began the long hike back to their vehicle, forever changed by their encounter with one of North America's most resourceful scavengers. The remote wilderness of Sakhalin Island stretched across 57,000 square kilometers of rugged terrain between Russia and Japan in February 2017. This isolated landmass had remained largely untouched by modern development, its harsh climate and difficult terrain supporting some of Asia's largest brown bear populations. The island's position in the Sea of Okhotsk created unpredictable weather patterns that could transform peaceful landscapes into deadly blizzards within hours. Officers Dmitry Kozlov and Viktor Morozov had been assigned to search for 3 missing hikers who had failed to return from a winter expedition 5 days earlier. Both men served with the Regional Emergency Response Unit and possessed extensive experience in wilderness rescue operations. Their mission was complicated by increasingly severe weather conditions that had already forced several helicopter searches to be canceled. The island's history included centuries of conflict between Russian settlers and indigenous populations, with brown bears serving as a constant threat to both groups. These massive predators could weigh over 700 kilograms and remained active throughout the winter months, unlike their North American counterparts. Soviet-era records documented numerous fatal encounters between humans and bears, though official statistics were often suppressed for political reasons. Kozlov and Morozov had begun their search at dawn from a forestry station located 40 kilometers inland from the coastal settlements. Their equipment included GPS navigation devices, emergency communications gear, and heavy-caliber rifles designed for large game hunting. The missing hikers' last known position placed them in a valley notorious for bear activity, though winter conditions should have made encounters less likely. The morning of February 9th started with light snowfall that gradually intensified as the officers penetrated deeper into the wilderness. Their snowmobiles handled the terrain adequately for the first several hours, following marked trails that connected various hunting cabins and research stations. However, visibility began deteriorating rapidly as wind speeds increased and snow accumulation deepened. Around midday, mechanical problems forced them to abandon their vehicles and continue the search on foot. Kozlov's snowmobile had developed engine trouble that proved impossible to repair in field conditions, while Morozov's machine became stuck in a drift that required both men to extract. Their radio communications with headquarters became increasingly unreliable as the storm system intensified. The blizzard reached full intensity by early afternoon, reducing visibility to less than 10 meters and creating whiteout conditions that made navigation extremely hazardous. Both officers had experienced similar weather during previous rescue operations, but the combination of failing equipment and deteriorating conditions created a situation beyond their normal capabilities. They decided to seek shelter in a hunting cabin marked on their topographical maps, located approximately 2 kilometers from their current position. The structure would protect them from the storm while allowing them to maintain radio contact with rescue coordinators. However, their route led directly through territory known for supporting a large population of active bears. The encounter occurred without warning as they struggled through knee-deep snow toward their intended shelter. A massive Russian brown bear emerged from the swirling whiteness directly ahead, its dark form materializing like a nightmare against the pristine landscape. The animal appeared disoriented by the storm, but immediately focused on the 2 humans as potential threats to its territory. Kozlov raised his rifle instantly, his military training overriding the shock of sudden contact with such a formidable predator. His first shot struck the bear in the shoulder, the heavy bullet's impact visible as the animal staggered sideways. However, the wound only seemed to enrage the massive creature, which immediately charged despite its injury. The bear's speed across the snow-covered terrain proved remarkable for such a large animal. Morozov barely had time to unsling his rifle before the charging predator reached their position. The animal's first attack targeted Kozlov, who had inflicted the initial wound and represented the primary threat to its survival. Powerful claws raked across Kozlov's chest and neck as the bear knocked him backward into the deep snow. His heavy winter clothing provided some protection, but the animal's razor-sharp claws easily penetrated multiple layers of fabric and insulation. Blood immediately began staining the white snow around their struggle as Kozlov fought desperately to escape the bear's grip. Morozov continued firing throughout the attack, his shots carefully aimed to avoid hitting his partner while stopping the enraged predator. Several bullets found their target, striking the bear in vital areas that would eventually prove fatal. However, the animal's massive size and thick winter coat meant that even serious wounds took time to become incapacitating. The bear finally released Kozlov after receiving multiple gunshot wounds, but the damage had already been done. Deep lacerations across his throat and chest were bleeding profusely, while puncture wounds from the animal's teeth had damaged internal organs. Morozov immediately applied pressure to the worst wounds while attempting to radio for emergency medical evacuation. The blizzard conditions made immediate rescue impossible, forcing Morozov to provide first aid under increasingly desperate circumstances. His partner's injuries were life-threatening, requiring surgical intervention that was unavailable in their remote location. Despite his best efforts to control the bleeding and maintain Kozlov's airway, the wounded officer's condition continued deteriorating. Kozlov succumbed to his injuries approximately 30 minutes after the attack, his blood loss having reached levels incompatible with survival. Morozov remained beside his partner's body throughout the night, maintaining radio contact with rescue coordinators while the storm gradually subsided. His injuries from the encounter were minor, consisting mainly of cuts and bruises sustained during the chaotic struggle. The bear was found dead near their position the following morning, having finally succumbed to the multiple gunshot wounds it had received. Wildlife biologists later estimated the animal's weight to be over 600 kilograms, making it one of the largest specimens recorded in the region. The missing hikers were discovered 2 days later, having survived the storm in an abandoned mining shelter. Morozov's detailed report of the incident became part of official training materials for wilderness rescue operations, emphasizing the unpredictable nature of bear encounters during extreme weather conditions. The loss of his experienced partner represented a significant blow to the regional emergency response capabilities, though his sacrifice had ultimately contributed to saving the missing hikers' lives. The dense jungles of Karnataka's Western Ghats stretched across thousands of hectares of protected forest land in March 2020. This biodiversity hotspot supported numerous endangered species, including a growing population of sloth bears that had begun expanding their territory into human settlements. The region's complex ecosystem had evolved over millions of years, creating intricate relationships between predators and prey that were increasingly disrupted by human encroachment. Forest Ranger Balakrishna Venkatesh had spent 15 years protecting this wilderness area, developing an intimate understanding of its wildlife patterns and seasonal behaviors. The 42-year-old conservation officer lived alone in a small cabin, positioned strategically between several villages that frequently reported wildlife conflicts. His duties included monitoring animal movements, educating local communities, and responding to emergencies involving dangerous wildlife encounters. The area's history included centuries of coexistence between indigenous communities and forest animals, though modern agricultural expansion had created unprecedented conflicts. Sloth bears, despite their misleading name, were aggressive omnivores capable of running 40 kilometers per hour and inflicting severe injuries with their powerful claws. Recent droughts had driven these normally reclusive animals to seek food and water in human settlements. Venkatesh's cabin was situated on elevated ground, overlooking the small farming community of Malahali, where residents had reported an increase in bear activity throughout the previous month. Local farmers complained about crop damage and livestock attacks, while children were kept indoors after dark due to safety concerns. The ranger's presence served as both protection and an early warning system for the vulnerable villagers below. The evening of March 23rd had concluded routinely, with Venkatesh completing his daily patrol reports and equipment maintenance. His cabin was equipped with solar-powered lighting and communication equipment, allowing him to maintain contact with district headquarters even during extended power outages. A small livestock pen behind the building housed several goats that provided fresh milk and served as an early warning system for predator approaches. Around midnight, Venkatesh was awakened by frantic bleating from his goats, followed by the sound of splintering wood as something large forced its way into the pen. His training immediately identified the sounds as consistent with a bear attack, though the animal's boldness in approaching so close to human habitation was unusual. Previous encounters had typically occurred during daylight hours at greater distances from occupied buildings. Venkatesh grabbed his high-powered flashlight and sidearm before stepping onto his cabin's small porch to assess the situation. The beam of his light revealed a massive sloth bear, methodically destroying his livestock pen, its powerful claws tearing through wooden barriers like cardboard. Two of his goats lay motionless nearby, while the survivors huddled in the far corner of their enclosure. The bear looked up at the sudden illumination, small dark eyes reflecting the flashlight beam with predatory intensity. Venkatesh estimated the animal's weight to be approximately 150 kilograms, making it one of the largest sloth bears he had encountered during his career. Its shaggy black coat was matted with debris from its destructive activities, while long curved claws gleamed wetly in the artificial light. Following established protocols, Venkatesh began shouting and waving his flashlight in an attempt to frighten the bear away from his property. Most wildlife encounters could be resolved through intimidation tactics that convinced animals to seek easier prey elsewhere. However, this particular bear showed no signs of being deterred by human presence. Instead, it appeared increasingly agitated by the noise and bright light. The situation escalated when the bear abandoned the livestock pen and began moving toward Venkatesh's position on the cabin porch. Its approach was deliberate and threatening, with the animal rising onto its hind legs to achieve maximum height while displaying its formidable claws. The ranger realized that this was not a typical food-motivated raid, but rather a territorial challenge that required immediate defensive action. Venkatesh fired 2 warning shots into the air, hoping the noise would succeed where other deterrents had failed. The rifle reports echoed across the valley, undoubtedly waking residents in the village below. However, instead of retreating, the bear responded by charging toward the cabin with shocking speed for such a bulky animal. The collision occurred as Venkatesh attempted to retreat into his cabin, with the bear's claws catching his extended arm and tearing through fabric and flesh. Pain exploded through his body as razor-sharp talons opened deep gashes from wrist to elbow, severing tendons and damaging muscle tissue. Blood immediately began flowing freely from the wounds, staining his torn sleeve crimson. Desperation drove Venkatesh to grab a metal rod used for tending his fireplace, swinging it with all his remaining strength at the bear's massive head. The improvised weapon struck the animal above its left eye, opening a gash that caused immediate bleeding, but only seemed to increase its aggressive behavior. The bear responded with another swipe that missed its target by centimeters. The fight continued for several terrifying minutes as both combatants struggled for advantage on the narrow porch. Venkatesh's ranger training had included basic self-defense techniques, but nothing had prepared him for close-quarters combat with such a powerful predator. His injured arm hampered his mobility, while blood loss began affecting his coordination and strength. Finally, perhaps deciding that this particular human was too dangerous to justify continued engagement, the bear backed away from the cabin and retreated toward the forest edge. It cast one final look at Venkatesh before disappearing into the dense undergrowth, leaving the wounded ranger alone with his damaged property and traumatic injuries. Venkatesh managed to apply emergency first aid to his wounds, using supplies from his well-stocked medical kit. The lacerations required immediate suturing to prevent further blood loss, while the damaged tendons would need surgical repair to restore full function. His radio calls brought help from the village within an hour, though the bear was never located despite extensive tracking efforts. The incident sparked heated debates between conservation officials and local farmers about expanding human settlements into traditional wildlife habitat. Venkatesh's injuries healed completely over the following months, though he was transferred to a desk position at district headquarters. The village implemented new security measures, including improved lighting and coordinated patrols, while the bear population continued to grow throughout the region. The encounter served as a stark reminder that even experienced wildlife professionals could become victims when territorial disputes escalated beyond normal behavioral patterns, highlighting the complex challenges of human-wildlife coexistence in rapidly developing regions.